Good evening. Welcome to the Auburn, Maine Planning Board meeting for November 12th, 2024. While we have a shorter agenda tonight, it could be fulfilling. I think there's some good changes here too coming up along with the subdivision one. I'll start with agenda item number 1, roll call to my left.
Riley Bergeron.
Bob Hayes.
Paul Jacques.
Dave Trask.
Darren Finnegan.
Tim DeRoche.
Maureen Hopkins.
And since Amanda Garrett and Stacy LeBlanc are absent, Maureen Hopkins, our newest member, will be elevated to a voting member this evening. Item 2 on the agenda is the meeting minutes from the October 8th meeting. Everybody get a chance to look those over?
The only question I had is, and it's more of just a kind of a point of order and how we want to do things. Do we want or need to identify who voted for what, either positive or negative? So if we have a 5-1 vote, we historically, I don't know if we've included like who the assenting person was, but, or might be, and I don't know whether or not we want to do that or not, but I just figured I'd throw it out there for a topic of conversation.
Is there any precedent with that, John?
So there hasn't been, it's just a roll call vote and the numbers are recorded. It's usually, we do, who made the motion and then who seconded. We usually keep that information. But typically that's all that we have in our notes.
Okay, that works.
Okay. Maybe during the miscellaneous items, if anybody wants to talk about that some more. Let's see what we want to do with that. Any amendments? Okay, seek a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't here to confirm or deny.
I'll abstain as well.
Okay, so that would be 5-0 with 2 abstentions?
Yep.
Okay, so motion carries.
That's correct.
Yep. Okay, so we're down to item 3 on the agenda. This is a subdivision amendment submitted by Elevator Evolution.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. Sorry.
We'll have a staff report first.
Oh, okay.
I misled him as well, so I'll go. Staff, would you like to update us on this?
I get to do the staff reports tonight. So this application was submitted by Elevator Evolution, and they are requesting a subdivision amendment, so it's a pre-existing subdivision, to split this lot into 2. There are already pre-existing buildings, and all they're doing is drawing a line. This is something that we could have done at a staff level, but the applicant requested it come to the planning board, so it would go through more formal review process. So it is in front of you tonight. Did you have anything you want to add, John?
Yeah, this is mostly for a land transaction, and it's being recommended by their attorney. So that's what's driving the planning board meeting tonight. So they submitted everything for the application. It seems complete, and any further questions we could certainly ask the applicant.
I have a couple. Does this require like upgrades into compliance? Because it looked like the parking situation was not. This is the first T5 one we've had since I've been on the board, but because the parking's right on the street. I thought there was supposed to be curbing and.
It's a business, Elevate Evolution, based on the use. It's a business use, so there is no parking requirements under the ordinance. So in terms of reviewing for that, I'm not quite sure what what we're looking for.
Because I noticed on page 2, it talks about Article 5 off-street parking and loading, so because it was put in here, my eyes went to, okay, well, the language must have been brought in versus all uses containing over 5. I just was curious as to the purpose of the reference in here. At some point, did I miss where it said we don't need to worry about this?
It's from Article 5, number 12.
Are you talking about the landscaping? I guess.
Well, it's, Article 5 says off-street parking and loading. Sorry to jump on your. And it says all uses containing over 5 parking and or loading spaces shall either contain such spaces within structures or be subject to the following requirements. And then it lists 4 of them, like bumpers to where the cars stop before the building, suitably painted lines and other appropriate markings. Just things like that. There's 4 things on there. It just seemed like those were listed there, like Dave said, in there, and I don't see any of those.
Yeah, perhaps we could ask the applicant, I didn't look at this closely, but we could ask the applicant if they could address that question.
Sure, I guess, are we looking in the application? What's Article 5?
It's in our report from the staff.
Oh, I see, okay.
I actually had to go on to like Google Maps to really see what it looks like there.
Yeah. The plan shows all the existing paving on the site. There's no really change of use to the site. So I didn't see any reason for any upgrades there. There is pavement here. I'm not sure if there's maybe an entrance there as well. And then, of course, the other wall right here has parking.
Yeah, I'm just noticing where it says, obviously they need to be paved with some type of impermeable surface. But it also says, parking and loading spaces shall be suitably marked by painted lines. I haven't driven by there, recently, and or never for that matter, but, and then a substantial bumper of concrete masonry, at the head of each parking lot or loading stall that abuts a structure or a rear side or side setback or property line. There's more in there, but that's the gist of what that says.
Yeah, and then it goes on to say that standards in that section have been met. And that's in bold in our packet, John.
Yeah, we would probably want to see, at that point, we would want to see those types of details, and that could be submitted. Is there any existing parking that's there? I'm going to go to Google Maps right now to see if there's anything there.
Yeah. I believe there's existing parking. I mean, there's certainly parking here. Though I agree that part of that is in the street, but that's in a pre-existing.
You would have to speak in.
Yeah. Could you bring it back up?
What's,
That's space. That's a space
You might be able to,
Yeah, I was able to get to the other side of the street when I was looking
might just be
at
able
it.
to click
Just
over there.
Click
There
and
you go.
point down the street more, though, where that blue building is.
Yes.
Hop, hop, hop.
Is it this lot or?
Just,
No,
yeah,
you
just turn right
Right in there.
and zoom, yeah, just
Yeah,
keep
it's that-
clicking in.
It's that brick building. I
See where the
This one back here?
yep.
And the, yeah.
So there's some parking, paved,
Yeah,
Well,
there-
and then the loading docks on the other side. So those are, I would say, demarcated. And that right there could be off-street parking as well. So there's no loading areas needed, correct? Yeah. So I would consider that spot on the, what would be on the northwest side of the building. No loading.
So, do you want to address what you just did?
Yeah, John, our packet continues to go on to say Article 5, off-street parking and loading. And that in italics on the top of page 3, that existing buildings are 1,663 square feet and 8,066 square feet respectively. No parking spots are required per 60.609. Off-street parking space requirements. So each proposed lot has parking on the side of the building as allowed in the T.51 downtown zone, as long as it does not exceed 60 feet in width or 40% of the lot's width. So I don't know if the reference to 607 having been met is because it doesn't need to be met because of 60.609. I'm just trying to follow how 607 has been met, but yet 609 is not required. That's all.
Right, and I think that's the case. But I would, looking at this, the planning board could make conditions to the approval to improve the site parking to be more in conformity with the form-based code. So, having add striping, things like that. There's no striping apparent. Having dedicated signs to really let people know where they can park and cannot park would be an improvement to the site. And then obviously having some type of border that really, identifies where the parking spots are and where the, like a curb, like you could have like split form curb that goes across there as kind of a stop bar so people couldn't drive into the building. So those would be some of the improvements that we could consider under under this zoning T 5-1. Those are some considerations that I think that the board has legitimacy in terms of asking about.
So it says there's no parking required on the smaller building because it's under 5,000 square feet.
Right.
So if it's not required, obviously you're going to have people parking there, but.
Right, but, in the spirit of the form-based code, I think the planning board could ask to meet the form of the district, and they could ask for specifics in the parking. I think that staff looked at this and decided that they don't need it, but I don't know if there was, any considerations for the form-based code itself.
Could I interject for a moment?
Sure.
I'm going to read a little bit of the information packet that we received, just to clarify, but also to make sure that it's accurate. And if it is accurate, I think it might shed some light And I quote, "The proposed division will retain the current infrastructure with both lots, utilizing the existing buildings, existing road access, existing driveways, and existing parking areas. No new site improvements or modifications are proposed as part of the project. The lots will be, one lot will be conveyed to Elevator Evolution for use, and the other will remain under ownership of the current use." So what I am getting from this, and I think what staff initially brought up is we're gonna have dual ownership of the same space utilizing everything. Is that accurate? Because that's what I get from reading this.
No, there's going to be a separation of the two. That's the reason why they're separating the land, because I'm sure there'll be two separate ownerships.
So two separate entities using the same building, the same lots, and that's why legal's involved.
No,
Okay, I'm confused then.
yep. So two separate lots with both different uses, and now they're going to be separated. They're going to have the parking in front that we're looking at here in this piece right here. This is, a portion of this is within the city right away, but a portion of it is the actual land that's existing. They'll be utilizing this parking for this building specifically. The other building is now going to be separated, so all that, the movement through this road here is still the city's right of way and still on city property. So what's being separated is the blue building and the brick building.
My understanding was that basically the current owner has that full property, and by splitting it, he could then sell off the brick building to a different company, and he'd continue his or her work in the blue building.
Okay, thank you.
So if we were to bring this up to the form-based code, where that maroon truck is, that would have to get pushed pretty far back towards the building, right? Because you're supposed to have a curb and landscaping on the street side.
Yeah, technically, now that I look at it,
And they would need a bumper on, like, where the rear of the vehicle is. There would need to be some type of berm or hard bumper to stop vehicles from going into the building. Just going by what's written.
yes, I think those items could be considered in this improvement on this particular site.
Is that applicable where there are fewer than 5 spaces?
John, if I may, too.
I don't think it is applicable if it's less than 5 spaces. But
Maureen, to your point, maybe that's why 607 has been met, is because there are less than 5. Certainly looks like there are less than 5 spots where that red truck is.
And the line's only like, what, 10 or 15 feet to the driver's side of that truck?
There's only 5 feet that truck is parking on private property. Yeah, so
I
in
mean,
other
so-
words, that parking strip right there, half of that is city property, half of that is private on the proposed lot. So I would question that parking right there is wouldn't count as off-street parking.
Street parking.
Correct.
And I will say that, form-based code does allow off-street parking within 500 feet in the zone. So in that regard, it would still meet the requirement.
Yep. Does it need to be striped if it's street parking, or? As
Staff, we would typically want to recommend that we do have striping. I know that we're reviewing a project very similar to something like this for another spot in the city, and we are requiring them to stripe the.
Okay. I just don't want to start with exceptions and stuff. It's clearly a well-established area, and
Right.
everybody that uses that probably knows exactly where the parking is and
Mm-hmm.
da-da-da-da-da. But I also don't want to set the precedent for allowing exceptions all the time,
We would not object to striping.
because that's the purpose of the form-based code.
John, given that that bleeds into the city street based on the property lines, is that city striping? Is that tenant striping?
So it would be the tenant's responsibility in this case we would write it in the condition of the approval. If that's a condition that the planning board wants to move forward, it would be the tenant's responsibility to maintain the striping on this, at this particular location. And we would write it into the approval letter that way.
Okay, so the city wouldn't have any issues with striping in their
No.
property, okay.
So then does this, the same would go for the other building, correct?
Well, we're only looking at, the application was only for this particular lot.
Okay.
We weren't necessarily looking at any additional ones.
Okay. That's all I had. Does anybody have any other questions?
Just a quick procedural matter. I noticed the application in our packet is not signed, and it looks like it's missing some of the staff checks. Do you have a completed application?
Yes, there was one submitted.
I did notice that too, Maureen. Thank you.
The actual application itself. No, this one was not signed.
John, we had one signed when we brought it in the packets,
Okay,
and I believe that Tammy has that.
okay.
We can sign one right now, though, for purposes of the meeting.
Yeah, we can take a look. I don't know if the electronic version was signed. We could take a look at that. So this one's checked off, and then the electronic version's not signed, so we'll have to have one signed.
Okay.
Again, we can make that a condition of the approval.
Any more questions? Okay, I guess we're ready to open it up for public comment. Unless you had anything further to add as the developer or,
No, thank you.
okay. Okay, make a motion for open public comment.
So moved?
Second?
All those in favor? If any members of the public would like to speak, please come up and state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes. Seeing none, I'd like a motion to close public comment.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Okay. Is there any deliberation or? Okay, so we'll need
Two conditions.
a motion that includes the two conditions that we talked about. Is anybody comfortable with the wording? Or we
No, I can give it a go, because we also want to include A, correct? All right, so let's give this a go. I make a motion that the proposed meets the requirements of section 60-1359 and approve the subdivision plan to divide the lot at 213 South Washington Street, assesses parcel 210-012, into two. Both lots will retain existing buildings, road access, driveways, and parking with no site improvements. Strike that. The parcel is in T-5.1 downtown traditional center zone, and the project should be considered pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 16, Division 4 subdivision, and Chapter 60, Article 4, Division 14 form-based code, with the following conditions. No development activity until any bonding or inspection fees is determined by the Auburn Engineering Department. The applicant signs the application, and the city is in receipt of it, and there is striping of on-street parking spaces.
Second. Oh,
Strong from the left.
All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Yep. Okay. And item number 4. This is a public hearing to review proposed text changes for the LD 2003 text amendment, specifically the possible limitation to ADU size and density reductions in the residential zones that are not part of the form-based code. So, again, staff.
So these are the same updates you saw last meeting. And because Maureen was not here, I will just go over them briefly. So we are bringing our ordinance into compliance with LD 2003, which is now 30-AMRS 4364, 4364A, and 4364B. The state gave us until January 1, so we are a little behind, but we're getting there. So we are, once this gets passed at council, we will be retroactively applying it back to January 1st of this year. The biggest things that we are doing is looking at density and allowing for accessory dwelling units on every lot that allows for a single-family home in the growth zone or areas that are served by sewer and water. You could put up to 4 units on a lot. And then adding in the density bonus for affordable housing developments, which is 2.5 times the density of what would be allowed there if not. And we have 2 different, last meeting we discussed putting a size restriction on the accessory dwelling units, and there was a lot of conversation about it. So at this meeting, you guys will vote on those 2 things separately. So changing all the density things in the ordinance and then changing the definition and putting on that number if you choose. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have 2 separate potential motions in the packet? I only see one on page 3.
There are 2 on my sheet. On page 3. The first one's smaller, the second one's kind of bigger.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I did have a question while we're looking at it. The part 5 that has been added into all the 4 zones that we were looking at, potentially limiting the density and multifamily dwellings with up to 4 units if in the growth area delineated in the future lanes. Does that apply? Are there places in the low density country residential district that were designated for growth in the comp plan?
Yeah, there areas outside of?
In the low density, I don't like, so my recollection is that a lot of the development zone was based around where sewer and water ran, and that there's not any of that in the low density country residential district. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We would have to go back to our growth map and take a look at that. That's something that we could cross-reference.
That was my question, I guess, because I don't know that it's necessary in the low density country residential district to keep the added number 5 that's bulleted in our packet. And I actually would wonder how much there is in low density rural residential as well, and if that's necessary to be kept in that section.
Yeah, it's something that I'd have to, staff would have to research, but we could certainly, we could continue the conversation, and then I could come back to you guys and see if I can find the answer to that.
I'm curious as to is the concern on that, including it because they're saying that the subdivision law applies, or?
No, because it says if in the growth area delineated in the future land use map, and I don't think that any of that district is in the growth area delineated in the future land use map. So I think that is just useless.
You don't think, right? If it's not there, why have it? Okay.
I also think maybe for low density rural residential might be the same thing, 'cause it's also not sewer or water served in most of those areas. So I don't think there'd be too much designated growth area in those 2 zones.
I believe we just probably chose that wording because that's how the state's wording it, and it covers us in case there is that parcel that maybe hits both or is an underlier, or when we're doing the comprehensive plan this next go around, it would help cover that as well if anything were to fall into.
This arose from a discussion we had when we talked about. We've had obviously a bunch of workshops on LD 2003, and I believe that legal thought that we would be able to defer to our density in those zones that aren't designated for growth, as opposed to even including a multiplier. And I guess that would be kind of a more restrictive interpretation, but that we might be able to do that. So that's why I thought we might be not including these unless we had to.
So Riley, to answer your question, it does appear that there is some low density country residential. I know it's really hard to see on this layer, but if I click this off, so everything here that's kind of like in this green area is what's considered our growth area. This little finger that comes out here, this is low country density residential. There's some rural res stuff here. Now if I turn it on, you can see it here that this is low density country residential. There is some rural residential as well. So to answer your question, that's where we're at, based on the future land use map.
Thanks.
Yep. That was a good question. I didn't know the answer. I didn't know they wanted to read it.
Well, that's getting pretty granular, but it's important. Thank you, Riley, for bringing that up. Any other questions for staff?
I guess not a question, but clarification. In the motion, we talked about accessory structure. Actually, are we still talking ADUs?
We would, accessory structure, accessory dwelling unit would fall under that, but it would also include garages or barns or other things on the site that might be accessory to the dwelling unit, but not necessarily be an accessory dwelling unit.
So all of a sudden, if we, especially if you get into the LDCR or rural, somebody had a house and wanted to put up a barn,
So what language specifically are you talking about?
I got kind of confused because I was reading through and I came to the motion, and actually even in the recommendations, it speaks of accessory structure. But I think we're primarily talking about additional dwelling units under LD 2003.
You can see it in paragraphs 5 and 6 on page 3, accessory structures and quotes. And I was going to bring up the same inquiry. This suddenly shifted from ADU to a structure. And it was just clarified that that structure could be variable. And that seems to be outside of the direction of this whole topic.
Yeah, we define our ADU and accessory structures separately. They're uninhabitable structures are accessory structures. That's something that that we're actually working on. So I think you bring up a point. The text does not change, but we could certainly modify that finding.
Yeah, for me, I think it's important that it stays linear, that these are ADUs, these are dwelling units. They're
Yeah.
not X, Y, or Z, or whatever the property owner might want that has found a loophole.
Right. Yeah. I think the term dwelling units could be used in this. It doesn't necessarily, they could be exactly the same size. They might not be accessory to one another. They could be 1,500 and 1,500. If we're solid on the 1,500, it could be just another dwelling unit, additional dwelling unit on the lot.
Right, but staying in the nature of LD 2003 being accessory dwelling units, I think, for me, I mean, if other people speak up, but from my perspective, I think it's important that we keep that nomenclature and not make it variable.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. If we're talking structures, I mean, I have an issue on setting a size limit regardless of whether or not it's an accessory structure and an accessory dwelling unit. But especially if it's a structure, which could include, but also could include other things. You know, I think that's way, way, way overreach. I did want to ask before, I know, Paul, you probably want to open up public comment for these, but the proposed language changes, page 1, the very 2 in blue, or attached 1,500, is that basically assuming that we're in agreement that if we collectively vote yes on limiting the structure, that's where that language would go?
That's
for the
correct.
ADU?
Yes.
Is it referenced anywhere else in here, John?
No, not that
Okay.
I'm aware of. No.
I'm generally opposed to the size limit as well. I think the market will take care of that, and there's a wide variety of home sizes within the form-based code areas already, and I just don't see a reason. I haven't heard a reason either to limit the size beyond aesthetics. If anybody has a different idea that I haven't heard yet, I'd like to hear it.
I guess I really don't have a reason per se, but I guess respecting the request from our city manager, who's been with us for years and in the position of city manager, I guess I'd weigh more towards what our city manager might request. I do think we did have some discussion. We're talking about additional dwelling units. One purpose of that is to provide more housing, first off, but also it does affect affordability. So the bigger the structure, the less affordable it's going to be maybe for that first family. So I think limiting size and recognizing that we are going into the comprehensive planning activity, and that's the reason the city managers made the request, is let's, wait and let the group that gets together and brings their recommendations later to us to consider something bigger, more or less.
Yeah, I guess for me, I try to go back to either science or some type of something other than just, because we're not an extension of city council. We're not an extension of an elected body. And to me, based on lot setbacks, the homeowner's ability to afford whatever size they want, if it fits within the confines of the setbacks based on the zone that they're in, I don't see why we should be mandating or dictating a maximum. If it impacts their ability to sell it down the road, then that was their choice to make based on what fit for them. But I don't see us. I haven't found an argument as to why we should limit it.
I agree.
Yeah, and I guess I'll make one point. A lot of us were involved with changing a lot of the zoning throughout the city. Well over probably 2,000 acres of really flexible zoning, and I think that there's a lot of people in the community that are benefiting from that. And if you think about being able to fit an ADU on some of these smaller lots, the 1,500 number really, strikes a real point with that, and the ability to kind of, make sure that it melds with the existing neighborhood, and that, it's not going to be something that's, sought as something that's abnormal. And you think about the form and how we define the form-based code. I think this really applies to a lot of what land that we're looking at throughout the city. It goes in the spirit of what we've all worked towards in terms of allowing additional housing to be built. And we really talked about it at length about, allowing the next generation to be here, the existing generation to be here. 1,500 really strikes 3 bedrooms, 2 bath. I mean, that's really what everyone in the room, I think, that strives towards, to have a family and to have that. I don't think there's a taking from anybody, but if we think about the existing neighborhoods and some of the things that are existing, I think it makes sense. I know the city manager certainly is my boss, and I'm going to vouch for him. But, after a long conversation of talking through this and applying the size of the home on the face of the earth in these neighborhoods, 1,500 makes a lot of sense. And I think you can get a lot done with that. And I don't think it's a loss, and a lot of other communities are doing the same thing, so.
Yeah, I'd agree with what your thoughts if it was limiting someone's ability to build the initial house, but being an additional dwelling unit, I don't see as, because if we're going to be able to have one in every zone, I think that the intent of zones is, in general, to have some sort of ubiquity in an area, and I think the intent of some of these zones would limit the size of some of the, like an additional unit, just for, and then you said aesthetics, and I guess that really is ultimately kind of what the zone is set up to do.
Yeah, I guess for me, we don't set those limitations elsewhere with regard to, if I buy a lot, my limitation is the size of the lot and what I can put there. It's not, it has to be a colonial or a farmhouse or a whatever. And if I've got, if I've got the acreage and I've got an existing 3,200 square foot house and I want to build an ADU for my child and their growing family, putting a 2,000 square foot ADU attached to it wouldn't look out of character. 1,500 might actually look small. So I guess I just don't agree with setting up a limit.
I guess I'd ask the question, if you had the property and you had the additional land area to build a similar house to what you might have originally, does a second structure, maybe if a parcel is broken off as a separate lot and has the larger, that's no longer an ADU, correct?
That's correct.
So I guess, again, if one has the additional property, he need not really have it considered an ADU. In fact, it'd be better for the community to have such a bigger structure put on a separate lot, because I think down the road, we are going to have an issue of splitting lots when suddenly the family situation divides and suddenly you're looking towards original house and ADU no longer being held by one property owner, but needing to be split. So I think that I see Dave's point, but I think the ones that have the land that can be split off and allow the structure to be built to whatever size, so be it. But I think that, again, we're discussing this in relation to LD 2003 and ADUs as providing, again, affordable options for young families, and also providing for our older generation as they may be seeking to downsize.
Yeah, I guess for me, obviously the lot size, there are lots that are sizable enough to have a 2,000 square foot ADU, but might not have the total lot square acreage or curb cut or whatever to be split to actually have another dedicated lot. So, and I do want things to be affordable, and I do want options, and certainly, maybe the option is I need a 4-bedroom. And LD 2003, yeah, that's in the spirit of it because we're bringing affordability. But now I'm saying, well, I really could use a 4-bedroom, or I can afford to do a 5-bedroom, and that fits my family need, and now I can't.
But you could add that to your present structure and build on, and that still is an ADU.
Well, so I bet, but at this stage, though, since we're no longer at a workshop, are you saying that you would vote against this as it is, or that you would like to maybe workshop it again and come back? Because I don't know that we could make as many amendments as we would need to be able to pass this without those limitations.
Yeah, I mean, I know we still need public comment on both of these, but I would vote no as the first one is written. And because it's written in line number 2 of the text, then I would be voting no on that as well.
So you're not, okay.
No, we came to the same impasse at the workshop meeting, so I don't think any further workshops would make a difference in this, so, yeah.
I just wasn't sure if you were trying to have it come back to us with different wording.
Are there any other questions for staff before we open the public comment? Or discussion? Okay. I'll seek a motion then to open public comment.
So moved?
Seconded.
All those in favor? If anybody from the public would like to speak, please step up to the podium. State your name and address, and we'll give you 5 minutes. Good evening, Mr.
Thank
Cleveland.
you. I wouldn't want you to go without some public comment, at least. John Cleveland, 183 Davis Avenue, Auburn, Maine, if you've forgotten. What I want to do is bring to your attention in your packet that was provided by staff, a state law which amended LD 2003. It's called an act to protect certain unfiltered drinking water sources. This was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor on June 22nd, 2023. What this does is specifically and only for Lake Auburn's entire watershed is exempted from all 2003 requirements. So any of the requirements there don't apply from 2003 to that watershed. I just wanted to make sure that you had noted that that's the case in that particular area. The city, of course, could have its own requirements in regards to zoning there. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. Again, if you've forgotten since the last meeting or many prior. I want to reiterate what Mr. Cleveland has just stated in regard to the LD that was numbered as an LD number 1473, which made that exemption from the effects of LD 2003, which by that time was statutorily Section 4364, from all of the requirements of density, the multiplier effect, and ADUs. Those are all not applicable or not mandatory with respect to that part of the area or the city that's within the watershed. Not only the agriculture and resource protection part of the watershed, but also the remainder of the watershed, all of which is now, or virtually all of which is in the low-density country district after the former rural residential parts of the watershed were converted from the 1 acre minimum to the 3 acre minimum, you may recall, moving it from rural residential to low-density country residential. So you're free to enact matters with respect to that territory if you wish, but you're not obligated to do so under the provisions of LD 1473, as Mr. Cleveland has mentioned, which was enacted last year. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is in response to the concerns expressed by Mr. Trask and others with respect to the maximum potential square footage of an ADU. I have no particular dog in this fight, but I understand the reasons for the maximum, which is that in rural areas in particular, there have been older, relatively small-sized, modest dwellings that were built by people of modest incomes at the time, when living in a rural area was cheaper to do than frequently living in a suburban residential area. And the fear is, or the potential danger that's perceived, is that someone with a small, older house of that sort in a rural residential area, low-density country or one of the other areas, might then seek to build what it purports to be an ADU of unlimited size, McMansion, next to the small original house, and then knock down the original house, and now you have a very splendiferous, much larger house, which, while perfectly legal, would ignore the concept of this being an accessory dwelling unit. It becomes de facto a new principal unit, which is not the purpose of the ADU concept. So again, I have no dog in the fight, but that's the fear that the absence of a size restriction could bring about. I've seen this occur in some particular residential settings, and it might well occur citywide if there were no size limitation. Thank you.
As there are no other members of the public here, I'll seek a motion to close public comment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay. Anybody have anything to talk about?
Mr.
Sorry.
Beal iterated my feelings on limiting the size eloquently. I've been having a hard time putting it into words, but I echo his perspective. I think there's more discussion to have. I think we need to remember that they are accessory dwelling units, not additional dwelling units. I think there's some energy that can be put into focusing on what an accessory versus an additional is. I think there is validity in limiting size. I took it upon myself and researched what other towns in Maine have done, and there are a lot of limitations. Some towns limit by a percentage of the square footage of the primary home. Others have limited to under 1,000 feet, 1,000 square feet. I'm not saying that's the direction Auburn has to go, but my perspective is there is validity in a limit because we don't know what box we might open by not having a limit.
Question for staff. If the property has the size available for it, is there any reason why somebody couldn't buy a smaller house that was suggested by Mr. Beal and build a new house adjacent to it with the intention of tearing down the first one anyway, and just because they want the lot, they want the size of the lot, and they can tear it down?
Yeah, I mean, that could be a process that they could have. That brings up a good point, that sequentially, you may want to apply for a demo permit and then apply for the building permit, but with the understanding that you're going to still living in the existing home, the smaller home. Is that the thought process that you had?
Yeah, I guess I didn't see the argument that there'd be concern that at some point they build the ADU and then decide that they want to tear down the existing house, because there's a process already, whereas if that was their original intent, they could do it now anyway.
Yep, they could do that.
With regards to the watershed, I think, didn't we have the discussion that we wanted to exempt the watershed from the LD, like we had all agreed to exempt the any of the land in the watershed from the LD 2003 additions.
ADUs are permitted in the watershed now, correct, John?
Say that again?
Aren't our ADUs permitted in the watershed?
Additional homes are not allowed in the watershed. There is specific, in the table, there's specific language that does not allow it.
Yeah, I think we had gone over that when
Right.
we were going over a while ago about the watershed rules regarding this. So
That's And initially, we actually adopted in the Taylor Pond watershed, we adopted where we ended up landing for the whole entire city, the additional density. We went in that route sequentially, and then the feedback that we got from the city manager's office is that we should replicate that throughout the whole entire city in terms of density for the additional third and fourth home.
So, John, what is the permitted subject to Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District accessory dwelling unit
Allowance mean then?
So it's the language that that does not allow additional homes in the watershed?
So, okay, so this is where I get confused. So if it's in a column that says address accessory dwelling unit, which starts on the previous page, and then it says permitted subject to it,
Right, it's permitted.
is it not permitted because of that?
That's right, it's not permitted. Let's take a look.
Is that, or is that another one of those that's permitted, but because, as more of a reference point, and because of it, because that actually says it's not permitted, that's what it actually means?
Yeah, that's strangely worded, but that is, that's what I'm getting to. It starts with permitted, but it says permitted to the accessory dwelling unit allowances, and the allowances are none, so.
It's one of those you say yes to, then say no.
Let's see.
There was also talk earlier about making sure that it wasn't, even though the motion suggested structure, that it not be structure.
Yeah, I think
Right? Yeah.
I think if whoever's going to make a motion should use the term accessory dwelling unit. Is that what we landed on with that? And so we're voting on these separately, is what we're, the plan? We got anything else?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District and whether it's permitted or not.
It's not permitted. There's
So should it say not permitted?
well, what is permitting is the dwelling unit allowances, and the allowances are none.
And the allowances are 0?
Yeah,
That's correct.
that is weird phrasing, but the permission is for the allowances, and the allowances are 0.
I guess that allows if sometime in the future the allowance were to go to 1, we wouldn't have to go back and edit that part.
We're actually even limiting straight up, not accessory dwelling units, but dwelling units per year to 3. There's even stronger language now that the planning board has passed through, and now it's been codified, it's all here. The language is in here, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. I was gonna maybe say what you're gonna say. There is no, there's no difference between ADU and dwelling unit on that. The 3 units is just 3 units across the whole entire watershed. So it could be ADU, or it could be just the dwelling unit. So on a vacant lot. So to answer your question, it's 3 units total in a year, in a calendar year, and it could be either an ADU or a dwelling unit. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, John.
Yep. I had to go back and read it.
Please, yeah. You can step up to the podium, yes. You still had time left on your...
11 seconds. There is an absolute prohibition in the Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District Ordinance at present against construction of any dwellings in that part of the watershed, 73% of the area of the watershed, which overlies the AGRP zone. There is residential construction permitted in the 27% of the watershed area, which overlies the low-density country residential district, to a maximum of 3 units per year without distinction whether those are a principal ADU or temporary teepee type of structure.
I appreciate that level of distinction. I obviously, we talked about that at length for a long time. But it did go through a lot of iterations through the different committees and then up here, and that's the understanding I landed on too. Thank you. Are we ready for the question, as Mr. Harmon says?
I make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council related to edits established in Section 60-2 definitions, specifically focusing on the definition of accessory dwelling unit and setting the maximum allowable size for such structures at 1,500 square feet.
Seconded.
Any discussion?
I guess I didn't care for the limitation of the 3 buildings, and I don't appreciate the limitation of the 1,500. I think there are examples and opportunities where setting such a limit is not necessary, and I don't think we should be restricting it unless the size of the lot doesn't support it.
And I certainly recognize the reasons for having it, but I know there's pretty good ways to get around it. But I am switching to in favor of it just because I think the market will take care of a lot of that anyway. Because it is a cost, it's not very cost effective to tear something down and put something new up. It would be a huge expense for the time being.
I don't disagree with the market will decide, but yet that's why I'm not including it, because I think the market will decide. And if people can't afford to do it, then they're not going to do it. I don't want to tell them they can't.
Any further? Okay. All those in favor of recommending the 1,500 maximum allowable size unit? All those opposed? So the motion carries 6-1. And the other provisions, we'll need a motion on that one. We don't have to keep talking about it, right, unless there's more questions.
Yep, someone can make a motion.
Okay. Did you have something to say, Ms. Thompson? No. So I'll seek a motion.
I make a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to the City Council related to edits established in the Article 2, General Provisions, Article 4, Division 3, Low Density Country Residential District, Division 4, Low Density Rural Residential District, Division 5, Suburban Residence District, Division 6, Urban Residence District, Division 7, Multifamily Suburban District, Division 14, Form-Based Code, Section 60-2, Definitions, and Article 5, Off-Street Parking and Loading, all within Chapter 60, specifically pertaining to density and parking standards as required for compliance with 30 AMRS, subsection 4364, 4364-A and 4364-B.
Seconded.
Any discussion about the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries 6-1. Brings us to item 5, the public comment. Public comment's now open.
They already talked.
Okay, I will close public comment. Item 6 is miscellaneous items. Have you anything for us?
We've got two projects coming up. 502 Poland Road. It's called Poland Road Duplex Housing Project. There's going to be 4 duplex houses going up for a total of 8 units for the next project. We've got a lot of feedback on the 60-666 with the Connex box discussion. That'll be coming back. We've got a series of questions we were asked by council, and the council's asked us to take it back to planning board and to continue that discussion and consider some other items.
Are you able to, that's a good teaser, John. Are you able to summarize it all? Like anything around 666?
Yeah, I think mostly it's uses and how they apply to residential uses, and then obviously working on additional definitions. I think we worked around some definitions, but they want to broaden the definition a little bit more on some of these other items other than exactly what Connex boxes are, what storage boxes are, and what they might look like. I think a lot of the concern is the, what are they going to look like in residential areas, and how are we going to define those, and how are we going to define those setbacks? There was some discussion about permitting. I know we had some very specific language in there about permitting, but I think we could explore that a little bit more and make sure that it's clear, a little bit more clear. That's all I've got.
So, did you want to talk about what you talked about earlier with the having people's names put in the minutes with or who voted for what? Or does anybody have any opinions about that?
I could go either way. I noticed that it wasn't there, and I'm not sure. Do you know if council indicates those that, when it's not a unanimous vote, do they indicate who was in favor and who was not?
Typically, we don't. When we provide the vote back to the council, we just let them know, be a 6-1 vote. We don't talk about the individual.
No, I meant there's the council minutes. I haven't looked at the council minutes. Do council minutes include who did and who didn't?
I'd have to take a look, but
Mr. Beal? Thank you. Yeah, I guess I figured that standardization wasn't a bad thing, but I'm also not opposed to just leaving it alone.
But is there some importance to it, if, to recall a vote or an issue? I think those that vote in favor can maybe bring it back as opposed that those that, so I think there could possibly be a need for the record, so it could be, go back to determine who can actually bring back an issue.
I believe that's accurate, yeah.
So I think that, as the council does, I think probably we should probably follow the same procedure.
Are you going to say something, Natalie?
I was just gonna say he's correct under Robert's rules. If somebody votes against a thing they can't, in opposition of, they cannot bring it back to the table under a reconsideration, and they can't vote in a reconsideration either. So if you were like having quorum issues and you brought back a reconsideration, you would need to know who voted in the original.
That's good enough for me.
So this would be something that would have to be in our procedures, maybe, or can we just
I would think you
say,
could just
Natalie,
ask staff to
please?
include anybody that's in opposition, I would think. John, are you pulling up a council one right now just to see?
Yeah, I'm getting all 6-0, 7 votes.
I thought I had seen it before, which is why I had mentioned
Yeah.
it. So.
Yeah, they did say the names. Yep.
And I'd also like to do this with Stacy LeBlanc here too, because she's currently chair, and not make that kind of a policy decision for us without her
Maybe we
having
can
some input.
bring it up as an item next month.
Can that just stay in the miscellaneous items, and because we can just bring it up for a decision, right? Even if it's in the miscellaneous items,
Sure. Yep.
or
Can do
maybe
that.
make a note of it and say,
I've never watched your council, but I'm curious, did they do roll call votes on everything, or do they just vote by a motion of hand?
It depends on what it is.
okay, I think we're done with miscellaneous. Seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously